Welcome to this week's Parsha Shiur, Parshas Eikev. Two very beautiful ideas that I'm looking forward to share with you. The first is from the very first posuk in the Sedra, and if you go to the handout, which is on the website torahtoday.org, you'll see the first box contains the first posuk of the Parsha. Eikev tishmun es hamishpatim. Because you listen to the mishpatim, the statutes, ha'ele, ushmartem v'osisum esom, and you keep them. V'shama Hashem Elokecha l'choes habris, Hashem will keep His covenant v'sachesed and the kindness Asher nishba l'avosecha, which He promised to your forefathers. Rashi is troubled by the word Eikev, the name of our Sedra. What exactly does it mean? You could have used other words. V'hoyo kisishmun es hamishpatim. Why Eikev tishmun? So Rashi famously says this: V'hoyo Eikev tishmun im hamitzvahs kalas, if the lighter mitzvahs she'odem dosh ba'akevov, which a person normally tramples on with his heel. Tishmun, if you keep those, if you listen and keep those, then V'shama Hashem yishmar lecha havtochaso, Hashem will keep His promise to you. What exactly does that mean? So my dear brother-in-law, Rabbi Jeremy Finn, has a beautiful sefer on the Parsha, the heart of the Parsha, and he makes a fascinating insight. He's referring to a Mishnah and a Gemara in Megillah, which appears in Megillah Daf Chavdalad Amud Beis. The Mishnah there says, it's talking about Nesias Kapayim, duchening. The Mishnah says, Kohen sheyesh biyodov mumin. If a Kohen has certain blemishes on his hand, lo yiso es kapov, he should not duchen. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, af misha hoyu yodov tzuvues. Even if his hands are colored with satin, with stained with stasis, like a dye, and therefore his hands are all colored and they're very sort of distracting. Lo yiso es kapov. Because the people will look at the hands, which is a problem during Berachas Kohanim, and therefore he should, that sort of makes him invalid to duchen. Now, says the Gemara, Omer Rav Huna, Zavlagon lo yiso es kapov. If a person has watery eyes, in other words, there are things which is noticeable that will distract the person in the audience, in the shul, and he will look at the kohen, it will attract attention. That is a problem when it comes to duchening. Says the Gemara, there was a person in the neighborhood of Rav Huna, he had this problem, and yet he would duchen. Says the Gemara, they were used to him in the city. They were accustomed to his mum. And indeed the Brisa supports that, because it says the general default rule is as avlagon, a person who has these watery eyes, I think that's what it means, lo yiso kapov, then muta. And Rabbi Yehuda says, misha hoyodov tzuvuos, if his hands are colored, lo yiso kapov, so he's got paint in all different colors over his hand, it's very distracting. Lo yiso kapov, tono, and again the same thing, im roiv anshe hoyim melachton bekach. If that is the profession of the majority of people in town, then people are used to it, and it's muta. So you see that the expression dosh there in the Gemara in Megillah means that an activity that you become used to. It's something which is so familiar to you that it's no longer distracting. And therefore, perhaps Rashi is referring to mitzvahs that are dosh ba'akevov, that we perform so regularly, that we have become so accustomed to them that we perform them perfunctorily, without passion. That's exactly the problem. In hamitzvahs kalas, she'odem dosh ba'akevov, you do them out of rote. We have grown sort of totally accustomed to them, and we're like robots. We're doing them on autopilot. If those mitzvahs you're still doing properly, with passion, then v'shama Hashem Elokecha yishmar lecha havtochaso. That's what it's referring to. And that it fits in very well with what Rabbi Leff speaks about on Tisha B'Av in reference to the reason given by the Gemara of why Churban Bayis Rishon happened. And the Gemara in the Nedarim tells us in Nun Aleph, in Daf Tzadi Aleph or Mud Aleph, I think it is, the Gemara says that Shelo Berchu B'Torah Tchila, because they didn't make Berachas HaTorah. And the Ran quotes the Rabbeinu Yonah that it means that we cut HaKadosh Baruch Hu out of the picture, that we're sort of doing things on autopilot, doing things by rote. And Rabbi Leff expands that was the root cause of Churban Bayis Rishon, doing things out of habit and disconnecting HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the picture. And that's really what we're referring to over here. That for your Eikev Tishmun, in ha-mitzvahs kalish adam dosh ba'akevov, that we're doing things, you trample on them. Trample means that you're doing things because we perform them so regularly, we become so accustomed to them, that we're doing it without passion, we're doing it on autopilot. I'm reminded of the incident during COVID. It seems like a different world. That the story went round, the one chassid bemoaned to his Rebbe about his inability to go to the mikveh due to COVID restrictions. And well intended, he said to his Rebbe, but I've been going to the mikveh every morning for the past 30 years. How can I stop now? And the Rebbe, with wise insight, said to him, it's lucky HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not work for the Guinness Book of Records. That's exactly the point. That the question always must be, what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu want from me right now? And sometimes the answer is to go to the mikveh with passion and with persistence, and sometimes the answer is not to go. And that's exactly the point. The mitzvahs, such as shofar, such as lulav, because they're much less common than other mitzvahs, it's easier to feel the excitement. But we shouldn't forget about those mitzvahs which are regularly performed. And perhaps a good example of this is Birchas HaMazon. I saw a clip recently, a beautiful clip someone sent in one of the groups that I'm on, of Reb Steinman. It must have been the Sudas HaMafsekes just before Tisha B'Av. He was sitting on a low stool, and someone must have recorded him from the doorway to his kitchen. And he was saying Birchas HaMazon from a bencher, and he was saying it slowly, every word out loud. It was quite inspirational to see it. And this is a man who had the weight of Klal Yisrael on his shoulders. He was a busy person, and yet every single word slowly with kavanah. And that's an example of Birchas HaMazon, of something which we do regularly, and yet I speak for myself that we sometimes just fly through it without thinking on autopilot. When it comes to Birchas HaMazon, I must share with you the famous idea. The Shulchan Aruch says, and I put it at the bottom there. The Shulchan Aruch says, that you've got to actually enunciate the word. It's not, you can't just think Birchas HaMazon, you've got to say it. But b'diavad, you're yoitza, or bevad sheyotzi b'svasav, so long as your lips are moving and there's something sort of, it's not just thinking it. So the Be'er Eikev says, but if you just think benching, then that's not good enough. Then yotza. That if it is just due to a chayli because you're not well, or an onus, whatever it may be, then you're yotza. But otherwise, if you just think it, it's not sufficient. You've got to actually articulate it, preferably that it should be audible to you. Now, then the Be'er Eikev carries on and says something amazing. Motzasi lomo ein fei b'Birchas HaMazon. I found why there is no final fei in the Birchas HaMazon. In other words, the entire Birchas HaMazon has every single letter of the Aleph base, apart from one, and that is the final fei. And he goes on to explain, but let me just first tell you an amazing story, and then I'll come back to the Be'er Eikev. The story goes of a certain Rav who was walking in Mea She'arim 10, 20 years ago. And he happened to walk, a mashkiach it was, who was walking in the back streets of Mea She'arim, and it happened to be lunchtime, and he walked past a certain base of medrash, and he noticed the window was open, that he glanced in, he saw this old Yerushalmi. He was just finishing his lunch, and he was benching, but he was benching with a tremendous passion and kavanah, which was unusual, and it clearly registered, he made a mental note of it. And it so happened a few days later, he was walking in the same area at the same time, and again, he was passing this base of medrash, the window was open, and he again saw this Yerushalmi benching with tremendous kavanah. And the Mashgiach realized there's something going on over here. So he went into the base of medrash, he sat down with this old Yerushalmi, and he said to him, look, it's been twice now. I've come past at the same time, and I've noticed you benching with tremendous kavanah. There's a story. What's the background? And the Yerushalmi tried to brush it off, but the Mashgiach was insistent. And the Yerushalmi told him the following amazing story. He said to him that when he was a young boy, he lived in a shtetl not far from Lublin. And Lublin housed the famous Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin, where the Rosh Yeshiva was the famous Reb Meir Shapiro. And Reb Meir Shapiro was a charismatic and a wonderful personality, multifaceted. He was in the Polish parliament. He was the Rosh Yeshiva of Chachmei Lublin. He was a tremendous orator, the innovator of Daf Yomi. the innovator of Chachmei Lublin, which changed the whole yeshiva system, which we still use today. So a remarkable person. And the Rabbi in the Cheder said to the boys that we're very privileged, and tomorrow all the boys have got to come in Big Day Shabbos, because Rabbi Shapiro, the great Rosh Yeshiva of Chachmei Lublin, is coming to our Cheder. All the boys were very excited, and the next day they came in Big Day Shabbos, and sure enough, Rabbi Shapiro was there, and this old Yerushalmi reminisced that he remembers being there, sitting in one of the front rows, a young boy. And Rabbi Shapiro said the following to the boys. He said, there is one letter in the Aleph base that does not appear in Birchas Hamazon. Who knows which one it is? And he told them that it was this Ber Heitev. That the Ber Heitev says, again, I'll read it again, Matzasi Lama Ein Fei Birchas Hamazon. Why is there no final Fei, a face of it in Birchas Hamazon? Lefi shekol mi shebirech Birchas Hamazon bekavona. Whoever benches Birchas Hamazon with kavona, ein sholet by le'af v'loi ketzef. Final Fei, the end of Fei, the soft, the face of it, is a letter which connotes negativity, anger, destruction, af, ketzef. And therefore, therefore that's not found in Birchas Hamazon. So if a person benches with kavana, says the Ber Heitev, then ein sholit by loy af loy ketzef, no anger, no destruction will befall him. U'mezonosov, more than that, mezonosov metzuvin leberevach v'chavot chol yomov. His parnasa will be plentiful and readily available to him all his days. You should bench from a siddur, from a bencher, v'lo balpeh, and not balpeh. And he carries on, he quotes the Sefer Chasidim of a Maisa be'echot shemeis v'niskala b'chaloim le'echot nikroivov, and the mace came back to one of his relatives after he had passed away. And every day they're taking me to task for not benching properly, not saying the brachas with kavana. Okay. So Rabbi Shapiro told the boys this Ber Heitev, and this young man was so taken by what Rabbi Shapiro said, he undertook there and then to always bench with kavana, to spare himself from af and ketzef, to get this assurance of the Ber Heitev. Fast forward a few years, and Nebuch, the Nazis, had overrun Europe, and this young boy had found himself on a cattle car on the way to Auschwitz. He gets out of the cattle car, having been there for 2 or 3 days, experienced the horrific conditions, and he finds himself on the line. And the line is right or left, life or death. And as he gets into the line, he remembers the Rabbi Shapiro visit, and he says a silent prayer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, since Rabbi Shapiro came those few years ago, I've always undertaken to bench properly with kavana. I want to cash in on it now. Please spare me from af and ketzef. Before he knew it, he was standing at the front of the line, and he was sent towards life. And then he found himself on another line. This was a line where they were asking if you had a profession. And again, he said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I want to cash in on that assurance of the Ber Heitev that I've benched with kavana since Rabbi Shapiro's visit. At that point, somebody whispered to him and said to him, tell him you're a cook, you'll go into the kitchen. And that's where he was assigned to, which relatively speaking was a better place to be in. And therefore, the Yerushalmi then said to this mashgiach, he said, that's why I bench with kavana, based on my own experiences and based on this Ber Heitev. So that's really the first idea, that Eikev tishmun in mitzvahs kalas she'adam doshba Eikev of tishmun, then yishman achav tuchosei. And there are many mitzvahs that we do out of rote because we're so familiar with them. Baruch Hashem, we do them regularly. But the challenge is always to make them relevant and exciting, and to do so with kavanah and with passion. And an example is that of Birchas Hamazon as just described. Okay, now let's press on with the second idea. A beautiful idea I saw in the Sefer Yunei Chaim, Rabbi Chaim Shmal, who was the Rav of my shul when I was growing up. He's sadly no longer alive, but he has 2 lovely Sfarim, and I've taken it from the first volume of this Sefer. The Pasuk says, Eretz asher loy b'miskenus toichal bo lechem, loy sechsach kol bol, Eretz asher avoneho barzel umarer tachsov nechoshes. Eretz Yisrael is to refer to a place asher avoneho barzel. Now the Gemara in Tanis makes reference to this Gemara. The Gemara in Tanis, Daf Daled Amud Aleph says, Amar Rav Ashi, Kol Talmid Chacham she'ena kosher kabarzel. Any Talmid Chacham who is not as hard as iron, any Talmid Chacham, he is not a Talmid Chacham. As it says, Shneimah chapatish yefaiset sela. It should be like a hammer which sort of smashes bricks. Amalei Rabbi Abba Rav Ashi, Atun mehosan asnisin lo. That's where you learn it from. Onon mehacham asnisin lo. We've got a different source. Tichsiv, this pasuk, in this week's Edra. Eretz asher avoneha barzel, al tikri avoneha ele boineha. Not that the stones are like iron, but the boineha. The boineha means those who build it. Still, one should try and be pleasant in going about this, but one has to be as firm as iron. So that's what the Gemara's drasha is. Kol Talmid Chacham she'ena kosher kabarzel, eina Talmid Chacham, based on a pasuk in this week's Parsha. Good. The trouble is, the Gemara in Tanis quotes a source which seems to say exactly the opposite. The same Masechta, the Gemara in Tanis Daf Chof Amud Aleph says, Tonu Rabbanon la'olam yehi adam rach kekone v'al yeh kosher ke'eres. A person has got to be as soft and as supple as a reed, v'al yeh kosher ke'eres, and he shouldn't be hard like a cedar tree. So says Rabbi Shmuel, well, which one is it? Should a person be kosher kabarzel? Should he be tough as iron? Or should he be rach kekona? Which one is it? We're getting conflicting advice. So let's take a look at the Yunei Chaim, the large box in paragraph 2. Well, if says Rabbi Shmuel, hakushya me'ekar lesa. It's not a question to start with. T'shnei ha'ma'amorim heim ba'ifanim nifrodim v'lo yikarav ze klal. That there are two different aspects which do not touch each other at all. They're worlds apart. How so? Ha'maima harishon, the first maima, i.e., Kol Talmid Chacham she'ena kosher kabarzel, eina Talmid Chacham, hu be'inyane bein adam l'makom. That's referring to our responsibilities between man and God. Tahainu be'inyane halacha, i.e., when we're keeping halacha. Shesham tzorech ha'Talmid Chacham lamud eson b'daitoi. Of Talmid Chacham, the Rav in town has got to be firm and unbending. V'lo yivase me'uma al zen. He shouldn't shift and move at all. Va'afilu kol ha'olam oimdim kenegdoi. And the whole community, the whole world can be screaming against him. Lo yazizuhu mikabloso mishitoso be'inyan halacha. If he knows the halacha is this, then he cannot bend, he cannot compromise. This is what the halacha is, that's it. He obviously, if it's a beis din, and he is in the minority, then you go after the majority. That's a different story. And the shezeo cheto shezokin mamri, because after all, that's the chet of the zokin mamri, who continues advocating his position despite being overruled by the majority in the beis din. That's wrong. But if it's not a halachic matter, i.e., it's not a question of a beis din and the majority and he's in the minority, that's not what we're talking about. If it's a question of halacha for his community, and the community don't want it, or there's pressure against the Rav not to introduce this idea or not to uphold this idea, ein lo lozos afilu kolshu, he cannot budge even an iota. Ve'im noitem midas ha'torah afilu kolshu ein a Talmid Chacham. And if he therefore compromises on a clear halacha, he's not a Talmid Chacham. That's the first memra. V'chein, and you see this idea elsewhere. V'chein tnan b'mishnah in Edias Perek Hey Mishnah Vov. This ultimately is a Mishnah in Edias. Amru lai Akiva Chazar b'cha abar devarim shel yisi omer v'nascha av beis in Yisrael. Amazing thing. They wanted to appoint Rabbi Akiva as the av beis din on the whole of Klal Yisrael, so long as he would retract his ruling in 4 situations. Amalohin mutav li likari sheitu kol yomai. I prefer to be called a fool all my days, and not for a moment to be a rosh in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The people shouldn't say that I back down because of this position of leadership which you've offered me. And an example of someone who didn't stand up was Shaul HaMelech. That they said to him, don't listen to the Novi. Ovad Malchusa, he lost his kingship. Now Now, all of the above, i.e., of Kol Tamid Chacham She'eino Kosher Kabarzel, is talking Ben Odom Lemokum, between man and God, in respect of Inyone Halacha, that a Rav has got to be firm in his position. But when it comes to interactions with fellow human beings, Adarabba, Sham Ein Lo Lamed Al Daitoi, he shouldn't be insistent on his position. Eliyerach Kakane should be as soft and as bending as a reed. V'dafka Inyone Ben Odom Lechaveiro Nema Maimazu. So says Rabbi Shmuel, it's very straightforward. The contradicting or seemingly contradicting statements are referring to two different aspects. The first member of in Tanis Dafdala Domadalaf called Tamid Chacham She'eino Kosher Kabarzel is referring to Ben Adam Lemokum, my responsibility to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and there a Rav cannot be bending and moving with the wind. But the second member on Daf Chafam Adalev in Tanis of Le'olam Ye'odam Rach Kakona is talking about Ben Adam Lechaveiroi. Now then Rabbi Shmuel goes on and says something fascinating. Take a look at the third paragraph of Yunei Chaim. Be'echot hasfarim shenichtavu oidos chayev shel Rav Yosef Dov Be'Soloveitchik, Av based in Tekila Kadosh Brisk. He says Rabbi Shmuel, I once saw in a sefer about the Brisker Rav, Karasi shepamachas nikra Rav lebeis hamitbachayim. The one time the Rav was called to the shecht house, the butchers, oidos shur shenimtza be'sofik trefus, because there was a shur, there was an ox who had been shechted, and there was a shaila in trefus. So the Rav was asked to come and come there. Harav shal tabach bala behema kami yafsid im harav yachshif habehema. He said to the sheichet, tell me, if I rule that this animal is treif, how much will you lose? V'ono 10 ruble. And the sheichet said, I'll lose 10 ruble. Harav posuk shahashahu treifa v'shilim lebala behema 10 ruble mikisei. So the Rav ruled that the behema is indeed treif, and then he took out 10 rubles from his pocket and he gave it to the sheichet. Continues Rabbi Shmuel, K'sheshoma harabanit hamaisa, when the Brisker Rav's wife, I think it's the Brisker Rav, when the Brisker Rav, sorry, it's the Beis Halevi, Rabbi Yosef Dov Be'Soloveitchik, apologies. When the Beis Halevi's wife heard about what her husband had done, Amr la'arav imanoshach. I don't understand. Either way, im be'emes habehemi treifa, if the animal is indeed treifa, lama yeshalim harav mikisei. Why do you have to pay from your pocket? It's not your expense. It's not your problem. Your rule. Your job is just to paskin, but it's not your expense to bear. You're just applying the Shulchan Aruch. But if the animal is indeed kosher, and then why did you make it treif? So Mimanovshach, she said to her husband, I don't understand. If in truth the animal is treif, why do you have to pay? And if the animal is kosher, why did you say it was treif? Ono harav. So the Beis Halevi answered, Sha'asheila al asher hu machloikas hapoiskim. This particular this shur was actually a machloikas hapoiskim, what the halacha is. Ruba machshira, the majority of the poskim paskand that the animal is actually kosher. Aval hashach matrif, but the shach said this animal is treif. Va'ani pasakti lahachme, but I wanted to be machme, she'ein bi koyach le'ilachim mashach. I haven't got broad enough shoulders to argue with the shach. Aval ein bal habehema lahafsid mipnei yiras harav lachlik al hashach. But why should the sheichet lose out because I haven't got broad shoulders to argue with the shach? Lochein hitrafti habehema. That's why I said the animal is treif. I didn't want to argue with the shach. Aval shilamti lo hefseidoi. But I paid him his loss. Shemi'ikadin yeshi lahachshi karev hapoiskim, because mi'ikadin I could have relied on the majority of poskim who say that it's kosher. Now, most people will finish the story there. But Rabbi Shmuel, who was a tremendous Talmud Chacham and a real mumcha on so many things. I know my brother used to say that whenever he wants to know where a Gemara is, he's quicker than Wikipedia. He would call up Rabbi Shmuel, where does this Gemara say? And he would straight away answer him. He would be the boichin at a period of time in the London Beis Din to give smicha, and he would actually be the boichin and check. So he carries on and demonstrates, just as an aside, this wonderful anecdote, a wonderful postscript. Says Rabbi Shmuel, in the story when it's recounted, it doesn't say what the specific shaila was that the Beis Halevi was dealing with. That the shach was machme and all the other poskim said it was okay. Avol nira sheyahayabahema nekev b'tchul meleda. Says Rabbi Shmuel, I think I know what it was. That it could be that there was a hole in the tchul, that he had that from birth. The tchul is the spleen. So the animal was born with a hole in its spleen, and he had that from birth. The Taz and the majority of Achronim are matir. It's the Shach alone who is machmir b'zeh. So you see that the Rabbi Shmuel could identify this machlekes. Amazing. Anyway, finishing off. But you see, this is an application of what he said above. He kept both of the mamorim. He was steadfast in keeping his halacha that he felt the I don't want to be makel. I don't want to argue with the shach. I feel very strongly about it. But when it came to bein adam lechavero, shile, i.e. the loss that was going to be incurred by this butcher, shilem ha'hefsed mikisei, the Rav, the Beis Halevi, laid out from his own pocket, that he was soft and bending to this butcher that he paid from his own money. An application of his answer to this question. I came across recently a Maisa with Ramesha. David Kaplan tells a story that one time in MTJ, I suppose in Mesivta Teres Yerushalayim, one time a bacher was sliding down the banister and he sort of came down fast and he actually, to his absolute horror, bumped into the Rosh Yeshiva Moshe Feinstein. And of course, the guy was beyond himself in remorse. And Ramesha, what was his response? He apologized for being in the way. That is Ramesha, who's bein adam lechaveroi, was astonishing. If you look at the Ramesha biography, and indeed the biography of so many of our Gedolim, the bein adam lechaveroi qualities are just breathtaking. And David Kaplan says that Ramesha continued to ask the boy day after day if he's moichel him for being in the way, until the boy thought to himself, "This is crazy. I was in the wrong. I was coming down the banister and I bumped into Ramesha. He didn't know what to do. He asked the mashgiach, Rabbi Michal Feinstein, I think it was, who was the mashgiach there. I think it was him, and he said to him, "What shall I do?" So he said to him, "Go to Ramesha and ask for a bracha, and then he'll know that you've been moichel him." And he did that, and he was moichel him. And it was the same Ramesha where sometimes people weren't happy with a certain psak, and a delegation of people came to try and persuade him. And I think it was the Satmar Rebbe who said to this delegation, it's not going to succeed, because Ramesha is so certain, is so steadfast in his psak, he's not going to be movable. And that's exactly what happened. Ramesha explained his psak and he did not sway. Once he arrived at his conclusion, he was as hard as iron. He wouldn't switch, he wouldn't sway, because he was, as the Gemara says, he was kosher kabarza. And Ramesha himself demonstrated the balance of these two. On one hand, he was a Talmud Chacham who was kosher kabarza, like the Gemara says, Kol Talmud Chacham she'eino kosher kabarza eino Talmud Chacham. But on the other hand, he demonstrated the later Gemara of being rach kekana, because bein adam lechaveira I can be that, but bein adam lemokum, if I feel this is the halacha, that's the halacha. So there we have it. That is Parshas Eikev. Two very beautiful ideas. One from the opening of the Parsha of Eikev Tishmun. What exactly does that mean? The lovely insights of my dear brother-in-law by Jeremy Finn, and an example of Birchas Hamazon as being something which we're very familiar with, but the power of Birchas Hamazon as per the story and the Behetiv of Meir Shapiro, the Yerushalmi. And then the second idea, the reconciliation from this week's Sedra, Eretz Asher Avonel Barzel, that the Gemara darshans that a Talmud Chacham has got to be tough. Kol Talmud Chacham she'eino kosher kabarzel eino Talmud Chacham, and on that says Rabbi Shmuel refers to bein adam lemokum. But la'olam hi adam rach kekana va'al kosher ka'erez, that is a reference to bein adam la chaveru. Thank you.